Welcome back to More Media Records Off the Air podcast. I am here with my lovely co-hosts,
Matt
and Christian.
And I'm Lauren. You can find all of our social media and website in the description down below for more information about our club, our podcast, and all the fun things that we do. All right, we got a really good topic going this week.
Yes,
I'm
we do.
excited. It is posthumous albums, specifically Mac Miller's Circles. So I know you guys have done a lot of research and listened through to the album if you hadn't before, though a few of us came in being big fans. But what do we want to talk about? Yeah, us too are big fans of Mac in general. But what do we want to talk about in terms of posthumous albums? What's your biggest ideas?
Well, so for me, it's always kind of like the other artist kind of mentality, right? Like a lot of painters, they go through their whole life kind of being not well known. They're pretty poor, and then they pass away, and people are like, oh, well, he was actually a genius. And it's like, for me, I think, obviously, if you're a famous artist and then you pass away, it's, people are still going to think your art is good. But how much of that is kind of like, mourning or being like, oh, they're really getting this message out there, this and that, like, especially when they talk about, we don't have to talk about Mac Miller, but him specifically, he was going down that hole, which, I know a lot of rap artists that either go down a hole of addiction or gang violence. So it's almost expected, and it's part of why they're so famous.
Yeah, definitely something I thought of when I heard that Mac had died was the unfortunate truth that, drug abuse runs rampant in the hip-hop community. Drug abuse runs rampant in the famous people community in general, and honestly, everywhere. And it's an unfortunate epidemic that, causes so much loss and pain. And I know that Mac fans personally were just torn to bits over his death. And it's just kind of an important part to look at when viewing posthumous albums is how did they die? Was it abrupt? Was it unexpected? Was it something that you kind of knew was going to happen, kind of like David Bowie with Black Star? And, there's just a lot to look at in terms of the human aspect of the artist after they have died and released a new album.
I mean, yeah, especially in the context of Mac Miller, since he died so shortly after Swimming's release. It's a very weird situation to approach, and especially team wise and record label wise, how do you handle an artist after they have passed? And how do you put together a project, and do you even put together a project after?
Right. How do you be respectful toward the family? How do you be respectful toward the fans? How do you be respectful toward the artist? It's a very touchy subject. It's very difficult to navigate, but it's very worth it, clearly, with things like Circles coming out. That is an iconic posthumous album and did so much for fans in terms of closure, it felt like almost, So I was going to ask, do you guys have any personal favorites outside of Circles for posthumous albums? For me personally, I know I had From the Basement on a Hill by Elliott Smith, Pearl by Janis Joplin, which I didn't even know was posthumous, but I guess it's just a compilation of works from her. Grace by Jeff Buckley, I didn't know that was posthumous either. Hallelujah, one of his most famous songs was on that. And classic Lioness by Amy Winehouse, my queen. So do you have any other ones that you were thinking of?
To be honest, I'm kind of an oldie guy when it comes to rock and roll. So half the time it's something that comes later or is something that, expected, is like David Bowie. I'm a big Jimi Hendrix fan. So I know, for me, it's more like the idea of oh man, we lost this great, bright star. It's more of the age of his death, not necessarily the music itself that was so amazing. But I know I have listed here as well is, are kind of what more of the death hit me than the music. And it was the artist Selena. She passed away in a plane crash on a way to shoot a music video in the Bahamas. And, then her album came out and it hit #1, the first Latin album to do so in 1995. So then it was
not too correct, but wasn't Selena killed by one of her fans?
Really?
Am I wrong on this?
I'm almost certain you are, because I did a project on it for my Spanish class.
Oh, maybe it's just my dad telling me when I was younger.
There was another famous Latina artist that died in a plane crash that I think you're thinking of, but it was a male.
Was it?
I forget his name. It's on the tip of my tongue. But Selena was killed by her biggest fan, the like leader of her fan club.
That sounds very familiar to me, actually.
And she broke into her house and killed her and tried to take over her finances, claiming to be one of her best friends. It's a really dark and twisted tale, but I love Selena's music and I love her story, and I actually wanted to watch this documentary that I heard was really good about it.
Oh yeah, you gotta give me the name of that.
Yeah, definitely. But it is crazy what surrounds.
Yeah, I mean that and
album.
John Lennon, obviously one of, as a Beatles fan, that just hurt. But no, not more in the rap game. I know, Christian. I think you're more on a rap side than I am.
Yes, I am a big rap fan. But some of my favorite posthumous albums are well, obviously Amy Winehouse, Lioness Hidden Treasures. I mean, you gotta respect Amy Winehouse. She's just like one of the best to ever do R&B. Honestly, like her music was so soulful and so lively and so like had this such a unique style. Like, and especially just reading the track list on the back here, there's so many just amazing songs.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one was the Notorious B.I.G. Biggie Smalls, Life After Death. This album actually came out, I believe, 16 days after he died. And then, of course, Circles, because, I mean, Mac Miller has been my comfort artist for a very long time now.
Yeah,
so
definitely. I 100% agree. Mac Miller's Circles was just insane for the time it was released.
Yeah, and so like with the rap lens, would you say that, kind of my comment earlier, that in a world where, when they make their art, it's about, what happens in their lives and things that affect them, which for a lot of rappers involves selling or doing drugs or dealing with gang violence and living on the edge. And a lot of times, I know Biggie as well, like, talks about like, just wanting to provide for his family and he doesn't know if he's going to be there. And then when it does happen, is it almost like not as if like we should do something about it, but because, art is different than kind of like a reality of, making decisions. But in some way, is it kind of not like expected in some way? I mean, I guess like that sounds a little dark the way to say it, but I guess more of, is it something that, it's like we're not like feeding into, but like, yeah, we're supporting them talking about this.
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying there. So like drawing it back to Mac, I know that he had a lot of lyrics about, wanting to die, wanting to move on to bigger and better things in the afterlife. And with Biggie Smalls, like you were saying, he's talking about wanting to provide for his family, but not knowing if he's going to be there to do so. And it's extremely disappointing when you find out that he isn't there to do so. And it takes almost this sort of reflection inwards within the rap community, within the hip hop community, to recognize that this violence and this abuse of drugs is something that needs to be discussed openly as an issue and not as inspiration for bars. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, we see it all the time. I mean, rappers that have passed, like Juice WRLD, Pop Smoke, even though they're not really the kind of rappers that I would listen to, but obviously people that I respect a lot because of what they've done for the modern hip hop industry. I mean, it's just like it's a very tragic situation, and it really is getting to the point where like, okay, how many like hip hop artists need to die before we start realizing that we can't keep glorifying drugs?
Exactly. That's totally something I agree with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always like there's this hushed sadness that flows over the fan base and flows over the hip hop world or rap world or whatever genre that the person that has passed was involved with. And it's kind of just like you got to be respectful of the individual and not use their death to get on a soapbox, and be like, well, drugs are bad. It's clear as day that these artists wouldn't try in a million years to kill themselves with these drugs. It just happened to happen that they became addicted. You know what I mean? Like, it's so heavily influenced in modern pop, rock, everything. Literally every genre ever. I feel like there is just this reality that you're going to have to deal with drugs in the industry. And it's unfortunate because then the fans are left with this unsettled energy that they cannot ever hear from their artists again, their favorite artists. They don't know what they were thinking in their last moments. They don't know if they were planning to do more with their music career or where they would have gone. And I often think about Lil Peep, which I am not a huge fan of. Like, personally, I don't really know his music very well. And I know that his fans were just utterly crushed when he passed away. Like, people were sobbing and posting videos online and just torn to shreds about the fact that he had passed without having the chance to make it super big. Like, he was getting there. He was really on the up and up, about to be really, really, really famous. And then all of a sudden it was over. It was over for him. And
then correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like very sudden. Like the news just like dropped one day, and it was just like, okay, the fans just had to deal with it.
yeah,
And that has to be the worst way to like process grief, you know? I mean, and it is like artists, I mean, people that we will most likely never meet in our lives, but
they touch you in a way
Exactly.
that you can't explain. Like, I saw a lot of people online saying, Peep saved my life. Like, listening to his music was the only thing that got me through my darkest days. And people say the same thing about Mac Miller. People say the same thing about Amy Winehouse. People say the same thing about all of these people. And to know that their music was something that could help another survive, but wasn't enough to help their own life
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
really hard
mean,
to reckon with.
that's exactly how I feel about Mac Miller. I mean, in pretty much all of his albums, he talks about his mental health, and he talks about his destructive cycles with regarding drugs, women, and music. And it's just a shame that how he can be so introspective and so self-aware, and how he can like help so many people through these issues, but in the end he just couldn't help himself.
Yeah, it's a big issue with artists when they play their music. And part of it is when they write their music, they go down into a deep part of their soul, which they have to pull from, which a lot of times is depression. Which I'm thinking also of famous artists that I know of: Kurt Cobain, Chris Cornell of Soundgarden. Like Black Hole Sun's literally him talking about wanting to see the end of the world because he is so he has depression. And I think that is more of a alarm than, quote, drug use. I mean, drug use kind of and depression go hand in hand, but it's definitely more of, dealing with the part of the artist that they can't control. And, and also Linkin Park, was it Chester Bennington?
Mm-hmm.
Him as well. Like, his story is so sad, and it's one of those things where, like, afterwards, I think that is, a big part of their posthumous work is that it's like, as much as you hear them talking about them being depressed, them actually having something happen to them is, kind of like it encases it so it can't change.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it that much more like special to them for a thing in time.
And I think it's so easy for artists nowadays to get sucked into the lifestyle of drugs, and that eventually like leads to depression because I mean, just look at artists. People literally treat them as gods now. And at the end of the day, they are real people. So, and they have real thoughts and real emotions. So all like millions of people treating you like you're some deity, like that can be very isolating.
Yeah.
And isolation is honestly like what leads to depression.
It's a
Like,
very difficult thing to cope with. And unfortunately, the people that have posthumous albums couldn't cope and didn't make it through that. It says something about fan bases in general and the age of the internet and the age of having to know everything that there is to know about your favorite person that is famous, and still not being able to understand or fully like realize how sad they are when they are writing these lyrics that are describing exactly how sad they are. They're calling out, they're begging for help in a way. But Mac's Good News, that's one of the tracks that I think we definitely need to talk about. Good News is all they want to hear. It's all they want to hear. People oftentimes get upset with artists when they release these dark and real tracks because they want a party anthem, or they expect something from this artist that the artist cannot provide. And that's just so saddening to see that it goes so far that lives are lost. You know what I mean?
That's honestly why I like and respect Mac Miller so much, because he has said in multiple interviews before that he doesn't understand why all these rappers are just constantly talking about the same stuff. I mean, talking about partying and talking about, just this lavish lifestyle. And he always said that he is making music for what he is feeling.
Right.
I mean, you saw in Divine Feminine, he was in love. He was talking about women, and he was talking about the importance of women in his life.
Yeah.
On Good AM, he was in a better place. I mean,
he was just on the up and up, and
exactly.
he was excited about this new fame and this new rap lifestyle. And it's one of my favorite albums personally by him, and it always gets me in a good mood.
Except Perfect Circle Godspeed.
Yeah.
That's when Godspeed comes on, that's just like tears are flowing immediately.
Yeah. Like you were saying though, with the Divine Feminine being about his relationships, and then going into Swimming and Circles and what would have been the third album of the trilogy. He's touching on this darker subject of loss and not being with the woman that he once loved. And I watched an interview recently with Mac where it was right after his DUI, and he had crashed a car into a telephone pole, and he went MIA on the internet. He just said, nope, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not telling the fans what's up because I need this time for me. I need to reflect on what's going on in my life and personally take myself accountable for the things that are happening. And then he comes out with, of course, Swimming, and people lose their minds. And so he's back on social media now and he's back to doing interviews and being the personable and amazing Mac that he is, because he had this time to reflect. He had this time to write and get in the studio and make a masterpiece, in my opinion. I know a lot of people have differing opinions. Fantano.
It is
on
nothing
Swimming.
but a masterpiece. I mean,
I love it. I love that album. It's the album that got me into Mac Miller, which is, or actually the Divine Feminine. Scratch that.
Yeah. But as a person who is new to the rap game, I first got into rap with Kendrick, and then from there kind of, one or two here or there and some classics. But my roommate was super big into Mac Miller, and we were talking about before the podcast, like 2018, Swimming came out, and then a month later, Mac Miller passes. And I remember I could feel the pain of my roommate from him talking about him and playing him around the house for like 2-3 weeks straight to all of a sudden him being gone. It was like I felt the pain that he felt. And, then I listened to Swimming after he passed, and now I redid that and listened to Circles, and I think we should probably get, we're talking so much about Mac Miller. Let's get right into it. Something that I really thought was great about Circles is, you're talking about respecting the artist and respecting their sound and their vision. I know Mac Miller, his editor and his sound engineer, was pretty close friends with him. And after he passed, he's like, we got these. I know what he wants to do with them. Like, trust me.
Exactly.
And it turned out great.
That being his producer, John Bryan,
Yeah.
who's working on for Circles. And he also did work on Swimming as well. But after he passed, his family, you just got to give it to Mac's estate and his family for just respecting the hell out of him and just like doing him justice. They literally gave creative rights like in the entirety of the album over to John Bryan and said, you were there for all the sessions, you worked with him on this album, you completed the way Mac wanted it.
Exactly. I listened to a little interview with John Bryan, and my God, the way he speaks of Mac with such like high regards is so heartbreaking, because he was like, this was the first time in a really long time where I met an artist that I truly believed he had everything. He had the smarts, he had the personality, he had the musical ability like no other, and he was just out there writing these beautiful songs. John Bryan said while he was in the studio with Mac on multiple separate occasions, he had to leave the studio to go cry because he was just amazed by the lyrics and the musical like quality that Mac was producing at the time. And obviously he had such an emotional connection with Mac that he had the right to continue and finish this project and add in his own little twists at parts. And it was a really important thing to do to make it a cohesive piece, because the whole time John was saying that Mac was trying to leave a lot of it up to John Bryan and saying, well, why don't you go play the bass on this track? And Bryan was like, no, you go play the bass. You're good at this. You need to go do that. Like, I know that you can handle this and that you are the sole creator of this album and that you should. And so luckily, Bryan, in the time that Mac was recording, was able to get all of those pieces of Mac playing instruments and Mac singing and Mac doing all of these different parts of the track. And then he could use that in the future when Mac had passed. And that's a really cool aspect of the album. Also, I kind of wanted to go back to what you were saying about your roommate, and how it was just such a dark thing after he passed. Personally, Swimming was great, and as soon as he had passed in 2018, it was tragic to listen to Swimming again. But then when Circles came out, it was my freshman year here on campus at CMU, and I swear to God, the day it came out, I was sitting in my bathroom at 8 a.m. right before a class, saw the first video drop, sobbed my eyes out, left my dorm room, and heard the album bumping everywhere I went. There was not a single room that wasn't with their door wide open bumping Mac. Like, people were obsessed with the album when it dropped, and they were also happy to have something left for them after his passing. It was great.
And I mean, especially with Circles, it was almost like too good to be true, because on so many tracks, it sounded like he was speaking directly to the listener, letting them know, hey, it's okay. Like, it's all right. I may be gone now, but it's okay. Like, it's like he was honestly just comforting his listeners, like, a way that even he has never done, and he has been doing it for years.
Yeah, and it goes into the whole concept of what he was doing with these albums, because you guys can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but the whole point, it was Swimming, Circles, and was there a third one planned?
There was a third one planned that was going to be mainly R&B influenced.
Okay. Did it say the name?
No, they had not decided yet, I don't think.
Because, the whole thing is he's swimming in circles, and from what I read online, it was, swimming is more about, what you do through life. You're swimming to stay afloat. I think that's a lyric he has in the album, and it's about, doing X, Y, and Z. He was a hard worker. He has a lot of projects, so he obviously cared about making something that was good. And then Circles is, kind of looking back on like how you're swimming in circles, and how it either can be something that no matter what, it's something that keeps you grounded, and whether it's a good or bad thing, it's how you look at it. And that was the main thing about Circles. It was more mature. It was more stripped back. There was a lot less hip hop influence, a lot more R&B influence, and yeah, that the whole message. I can see why fans were like, "Oh, he's speaking to me," like because it's talking about being okay with yourself, and I think that's definitely what It's kind of a shame that we didn't see that when he came out, but I think it's even better now that
right. And even the tone of his voice, it sounds like he's right up in your ear talking to you. He's whispering these lullabies. It's like a beautiful, raspy, and stripped back version of Mac that you have never really had the chance to know truly. Like, I think you see parts of it in Swimming. I think that tracks like it ain't 2009 no more, 2009.
Come Back to Earth.
Come Back to Earth. Tracks like that kind of give you this energy of like, oh, he's going in this direction that is so different for him, but so genuine and real and singer-songwriter based.
And that's when we see him like fully embrace it in Circles, and that's why I have a problem with calling it a hip hop album, because there are maybe 2-3 tracks that I would say, okay, this is an obvious hip hop song,
right?
And even on like 1 or 2 of those, there's only one verse where he's not like singing and in his like beautiful singing voice, which I think was so underrated. People gave him shit for his singing voice, but like
I get a lot of that
thought
too.
It was beautiful.
I really like it. I'm a huge proponent of like the ugly voice. Like I listen to a lot of Midwest emo. I like a raspy voice and a gross voice at that, but this is nothing like that in my opinion. Like, it just gives character.
His voice is unique. I mean, there's so many artists. I'm like, is this guy? Oh no, he's he just sounds exactly like this guy. Mac, I knew it wasn't him.
Yeah, it's iconic. It sounds like Mac, and it sounds like Mac at the end of his career. Like, you can tell that he has gone through so much to get here through his voice and through his, lyrics and everything about the album. Should we get into the track list?
I think we should get into the track list.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, let's blow through this.
Okay.
All right.
So first track, Circles.
Circles.
I mean, what a way to start an album. I mean,
Beautiful.
with a somber tone, and literally the first line, "This is what it looked like
Mhm.
right before you fall." It's so gut-wrenching and real, and like how did he do that and then pass? Like, how did he get in the studio and sing that and then pass? Like, you just have to wonder how heartbreaking it must be for his family, how heartbreaking it must be for his producers. You know, it's like insane. Love the track.
Oh, me too.
Absolutely love
Me
it.
too.
And it's got like this circular vision to it, you
It
know.
does,
It's
yeah.
very looped and very cohesive as a piece, and I think John Bryan had a lot to do with that clearly in the end there, but it was still just iconic,
Yeah, it's like a mantra
classic.
to hold throughout the rest of the
It
album.
is.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it is like the title track on the song. So I mean on the record. So like it's got to display that message of circles.
right.
I mean, and I think it does it perfectly. I mean, with the soft guitar riffs layered with like the like lowly mixed vibrant synths and like the subtle bells, it's just like it's the perfect intro track, especially to this album with the somber yet comforting tone that
Yeah,
I mean Mac introduces here.
I agree. And then it moves on to Complicated, and you're hit with this again dark feeling of like, wow, this is really what he's trying to tell us in these times with these lyrics. Another synthy vibe, kind of like, I feel like that synth is drawn out throughout the whole album.
It is, yeah.
And it's really cool because I was listening to that interview, like I said, and John Bryan was like telling Mac that what he had was great and these concepts are beautiful, but Mac really wanted to just go with the keys on this album. He was like, guitar and keys, let's go. And John Bryan brought out this old synth from the 80s and I was like, give this a whirl. And oh my gosh, it created the album.
Yeah.
It made the album, you know?
It really did. I mean, we saw some of that on Swimming, but not in this particular style.
Right.
And I think he kind of realized what worked and what didn't, and what people liked and what he liked. And especially in this track, specifically Complicated, it just really worked. I mean, he also has a lyric here. Behind the wheel, but I still ain't on my way. He actually talks about driving a lot in other projects. And I see that as kind of like an analogy for like the control in his life. And the line "but still ain't on my way" kind of is like that loss of control.
Right.
Which,
I agree.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very complicated.
It is. I mean, it talks about like he's literally just saying like he's just bringing out all of his complications in life, saying why is my life so complicated? Like I'm so tired of being constantly bombarded with all these things.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure which song has the lyric "I'm so tired of being so tired," but it's just, you know, also echoing of this pain that he's feeling. And
I'm pretty
then
sure that is good news.
yeah, probably good news. And then it moves into Blue World after Complicated, and that is the track. Like, everybody that I know is obsessed with that track, and it's honestly what I feel like Mac would have wanted people to party to.
Yes.
You know what I
yes.
mean? Like, it's bumping, and it's, you know, in so much like respect of him. You know, it's a blue world without you. You're gone, and it's tragic, but
It is.
we're still gonna enjoy and celebrate your life and your works, you know? Great.
Yeah, that
great
was the
song.
one that I know, like, as I was listening to in the car, I was like, okay, this sounds more like the Mac I know, but I'm glad that it doesn't stay, because I'm glad that it's going through, you know, also like being more mature, having an idea, sticking with it. And yeah.
And then Good News. We're on to Good News,
Good
which was
News.
the
Oh
single
my
that was released that took the world by storm, that people were just so heartbroken by. And I I watched Fantano cry after listening to
yeah,
Good News for
I've
the
seen the
first
video,
time.
yeah.
And I felt that so hard. Like, the first time I saw the video of him floating on this beautiful lotus flower and having all of his like lovely pictures surrounding him, and just it's so hard to hear that he thought that people just expected good news from him and nothing more, and that they just wanted to hear the happy Mac. It's like, no, your fans valued you for everything that you are. So
Something I really wanted to note on this track was in the intro you hear these like 808s firing, and then it's like slow guitar plucks building up, and then the instrumentation fills out with his line, "Why can't it just be easy? Why does everybody need me to stay?"
right.
And it's just like, what am I doing here? Like, I mean, he refers later on the album, like, there's a whole lot waiting for me on the other side. I think actually later in this track.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a very sad but very like you can he lays it out so well. Like these are thoughts that he's had for a really long time, and he's just been anxious to get it out on a track.
Right. Yeah. Good News was one of the best of this album for sure. And then it moves into I Can See, which is another prolific, beautiful song. I feel like I'm just repeating myself at this point. What do you guys have to say about I Can See?
I mean, I love like the kind of like this fantastical, wondrous tone to it, especially with like the trilling synths at the beginning with the chimes, and just how like honestly ethereal it was. And I mean, basically what he's talking about on this song is that he finally sees his problems and his overall situation from an outside perspective. I mean, the title being I Can See,
Right.
which is, I mean, just very introspective and something we've seen a lot from Mac up until this point, but where it's fully realized.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
agree.
he's able to take, the initial thoughts of swimming and, so still, I'm assuming he made all this stuff in the same span of his life if he has all this like built up right before his passing. So really, he has probably so much of this idea to just, put out and then to work on. And I think, during this part of his writing style, he's like, okay, how can I have a beginning, middle, and end to this crazy thing we call life, and especially my life, one with my fans, one with, addiction, relationships, and, just music in general, because he's worked on a lot of other projects that are more out there. And I think the one that he puts his own name on, he wants it to be, very polished, pristine, beautiful. And I think this is definitely where, talking about Good News being like sad of like, sad that he passed, but, we're hitting to the second act, if you would, of a movie, and it's where the meat and potatoes are.
Right. And then it's into everybody. And this song just makes me think of Mac like walking down the street with me, the like big chorus of whoa.
Yeah.
That is just such a good rolling beat to it. It's just like
It is.
the perfect lull of waves and ebb and flow, and vibing out to the entire like track just feels right, especially in this place in between I Can See and Woods, in my opinion. And so then it moves to Woods. I don't know if you had anything else to say about everybody.
No, it makes sense because he's singing about everyone just wants to have a good time, and everyone wants to have these certain amount of things, and he's laying it out. I think it's also like his way of rationalizing from Good News, and I Can See it's kind of like as the album progresses, it's how a natural person would think.
Right.
Yeah.
And it ends with that, and if you're with me, I won't go away. And that's just, once again, heartbreaking. So tragic. And then
let's
into
move on to
Woods.
Woods here. I mean, I personally love how this first line is delivered. Things like this ain't built to last. I might just fade away like those before me. It's just in a very plain and like just a great tone from Mac Miller. Just like he really knew what he was doing on this track. Like he had his cadence down. He had literally everything figured out. And I mean, the subtle guitar streams in the back of the chorus are absolutely amazing, with those synths that I mentioned, like that we see on Swimming. And it's just like I personally love Woods.
It's one of the most interesting tracks on the list, in my opinion. It's
is.
stellar. It's great. And I remember a lot of people telling me that it was their favorite when it was first released. Having gone back, I cannot pick a favorite. I don't think you guys could either. But
Picking favorites is overrated. That's
I
what I say.
agree. I
I also
agree.
agree.
On to Hand Me Downs we go.
Mhm.
Another great track. I think that, it had a lot to say about Mac's influence almost.
Mhm.
The way that like other people influenced him and how he influenced others. I'm trying to think of some specific lyrics off of Hand Me Downs. I didn't pull any up, but I know that when I want to listen to this song, it puts me in a great mood.
This
And
was actually the only track with a feature on it too. And
yeah,
Mac is notably absent from the entire chorus. It's actually done by Baro Sira, which
Mhm.
I personally have never heard of, but he from this chorus I could kind of get the vibe that he's more of an R&B artist, but I would love to check him out. I really need to.
Right.
Hmm.
All right. And then
That's on me.
That's on me. This
Oh
is
my god.
a beautiful track. A lot of people say that they get like Beatles energy off of it. I don't know if you felt that vibe.
I could kind of see that. To be
Yeah.
I
honest.
mean,
yeah.
yeah, I could definitely see more of a like, not like poppy per se, but I can see that era.
With
you
that
know.
guitar looping, with
Mhm.
that beautiful little cadence he has to the way he speaks and sings on this track, and kind of just taking accountability and responsibility
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
so beautiful at the end of the album. It's on the last 4 tracks, you know what I mean? Like he's really taking accountability for the things that he's done in his life.
And especially on this track, I feel like he's really talking directly to the listener.
Mhm.
Like he's he doesn't outright say it, but in a way he's saying learn from me. Learn from the
Yes.
mistakes that I've made and please be self-aware. Like I mean, as Mac has been for
Mhm.
his entire discography now. And I mean, it's obviously in the highest degree on Circles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With moving on to Hands, I personally love this track.
Love this
Mhm.
track.
The beat got me definitely like intrigued. As
Yeah.
much as I love the introspection, whenever I listen to an album, I always like hear a beat that I love and
Mhm.
immediately they'll decide if I like or dislike the song to like listen to again.
Yeah.
At least it's not like from the album front to back. And this one was great. And he talks about his relationship with women, right? And his I don't know if it was specifically Ariana Grande, but
A little bit. It's he's got this tongue in cheek
Mhm.
character to him in this track. It's back to his old stuff. It reminds me
It
a
is.
lot of like, Good AM, like I was saying. And it's
I could honestly see this track on Faces. I
yeah,
feel like
definitely see that on Faces. Like
Yeah.
it's got that vibe of like, yeah, I'm a rapper. I still want to brag a little
Mhm.
bit. Like, yeah, I want to
Mhm.
like drop some bars about things that are cool about me at times too. But it comes back in the very end with that ongoing metaphor of driving, and the last lyric that you can hear is I don't need no chauffeur. I stay behind the wheel. I never half speed.
Yep.
He's like, yeah, I'm going hard. I'm still going hard. Even in death, my tracks go hard.
It
Like,
does. Yeah.
yeah, great.
I mean, I also did want to know about like you were talking about the beat. I love the pitched up vocal chop of the hit.
mhm.
Mhm. Hit
I find that
it.
so creative.
Yeah, it's
And,
really cool.
Like with the playful drums in the back, and it just works very well.
Yeah.
And it is very much Mac Miller.
Definitely. And then To Surf, which
Oh,
is
God.
another like
Hey, hey, hey.
yeah,
Oh
and
my
like
God.
once again, it gives me that like flow vibe. It's just something that you can always turn on and feel like his presence near. It feels like no particular lyrics that I have in mind stand out to me from this track, but I really do like it in terms of its like quality and sound. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I mean, I think you guys obviously are music lovers, and there's that specific feeling that we get listening to certain songs of like just floating, of just like feeling like bigger than yourself. And at least for me, this is one of those tracks.
Yeah.
Especially with like the theatrical synthesizers and like the post-chorus section that kind of just come at you randomly.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yep.
it's very good. I mean, a bar that I really loved, and was sometimes I get lonely, not when I'm alone, but it's more when I'm standing in crowds that I'm feeling most on my own.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it describes the feeling that we talked about earlier in the podcast that, I mean, fame does something to you where it's like you could be standing around hundreds of your biggest fans, but you can feel like no one knows you.
It is.
Yep.
It's a difficult
I know that was the
thing.
biggest thing with Kurt Cobain. I mean, his passing was way different than Mac Miller's, but, you know, people hear, you know, like they love your guitar riffs or they love your beats. They love, you know, just like the vibe you put off. But sometimes it's hard for people to look at the lyrics and really get to it. Or if they do, they're like, I love you because you're this way. I love you because you're imperfect. It's like, well, as much as you might love me for that, it's hard for me to reciprocate back in a healthy relationship. So, you know, it no matter what feels like a wall to him.
Yeah, very true,
Definitely.
very true. Because I
Mhm.
mean, fans know him as Mac Miller,
Yep.
not Malcolm.
Right.
And it's there's always going to be a gap no matter how close you feel to an artist because honestly, on some albums I feel like Mac is a best friend and he's
Right.
talking to me, but that was never the case and will never be the case. And I will never know him on a personal level and he had never known me on a personal level.
But
Dude, that
there's
would have been so cool if Mac Miller, if you're like 15 or like, you know, you're hanging out with
Yeah.
Mac Miller, be like, hell yeah.
yeah, that would
I'm
be
cool.
very
I'm cool.
That
cool.
would be
If only.
Sick as hell.
Yeah, it's a dream.
Yeah.
And then closing out with Once a Day.
Once a day,
Oh.
my God. Okay, so I think that this track is just absolutely genius, and the way that it flows back into the beginning of the album with that dissonant chord at the very end flowing into the E major that starts off circles. It is perfection and genius in work. Like, absolutely stunning. And the fact that it is itself a track about small circles that lead to the big circle. Like,
Mhm.
once a day I rise and once a day I fall. And
I am so glad you said that.
It's-
I needed to get that out. I had this like bolded on my
Yup,
notes. I was
yup.
like, I need to say this.
Oh yeah, definitely like one of the most like jump out of your seat, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he actually did that things of
Exactly.
the album. You know
I
what
mean,
I mean?
I think when I first realized that, I heard it on the Spotify Dissect podcast.
Yup.
But and I literally immediately turned on that song and put the first track in queue, and it was just honestly a surreal experience because the album Circles is a musical circle.
Right.
And it's just, I don't know if Mac had that intention or if John Bryan did that after, but that was on purpose. It had to have.
Yeah. I
Had to
mean,
have.
well, there's other ways that you could interpret that last note that's just so like different and dissonant. Like I was saying before, it could be the abruptness of his death. It could be just the fact that things are left unsaid, and like the end of the album just feels like this, whoa, like
Yeah.
pulled
Mhm.
out, stretched out, like, what? That's the end?
Yeah,
That's the
exactly. Even on its own, I don't think it was that like that weird to me
Right.
because it kind of showed the not really awkwardness, but that's just like lack of a better term for his just life in general in passing.
Yeah, like the unsettled energy that was
Yeah.
always there and that remained in his
Well, if this
death.
was planned to be a trilogy of albums, I'm assuming he wanted to have this dissonance so that they'll leave you wanting more, and then he gives you more. But, you know, unfortunately, you know, I don't know. You guys are definitely stands here. Is there plans to release what was potentially the third, more introspective album, or
I
was it
don't
just
think
his?
so.
I don't think Mac was even working on it at that point
No.
because he was already working on Swimming and
Mhm.
then
Oh,
he
true.
was
Yeah.
working on Circles like at that
Same
same
time.
time.
Like there were a
and it
lot of
wasn't complete.
tracks that were supposed to be in Swimming that
Yes,
made it into
yeah.
Circles. And
I mean, you can. I
vice
mean, as
versa.
we've mentioned before, there are a lot of parallels between these two albums, and actually, what they're called is like sister albums or something
Right.
like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean, but ending it on that note in comparison to the end of Swimming, where Mac has said himself that he wanted that very ending of like this ethereal, beautiful sound wave of like you floating up into heaven. That's what he said he wanted it to sound
Yeah.
like. And that was like literally a few days later, he's gone. And then this album comes out and he ends it with this weird off chord. And then you realize that it's the circle of this album. It's, take the time to circle back to my old music. Take the time to like continue to love what I've had to share this whole time I've been alive. Like,
And there is so much available to listen to for Mac Miller.
Faces was just released.
Faces now on streaming services. Honestly, my personal favorite of his work because I just love sample rap so much.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I remember listening to Faces on some app or YouTube or something that was like he released it on originally back in between Good AM and whatever was after that.
Yeah, it was between,
or was it between
it was between
Movies in the
Good
Dark?
AM and Divine Feminine, I believe.
Okay. Maybe not, but
maybe
he took
not.
the time.
It was before
Irrelevant.
or after Good AM.
Yeah, before or after. That's all I know because that was one of my favorite albums that he released on Spotify, and then this came out on Spotify recently, and I was like,
with a few mixing changes, and because they couldn't get all the sample clearances. But I mean, you just gotta give it props to Mac's family because they are doing everything right after his death.
Right.
I mean, honestly, I don't think that they should release any more Mac material after this besides his old previous mixtapes like this, because Faces was obviously the next step after Circles if they were going to do anything, and I feel like they handled it perfectly.
I agree.
Yep. And it's, about respecting the artist, and, I think you guys have heard it here. We got two stands here that love Mac Miller, believe that everything, about what the best way to handle a posthumous album is this way, to really respect the artist and also look into their life, look into the meaning, and realize, what makes an artist, what makes them stand out as a creative force. And when it's compiled in a way where we can continue to love it because music is, you can digest it multiple times, it's still just as great. You want to make sure that the name is out there and it's not tarnished, and all you can do is respect them, like Amy Winehouse as well. Just, they were a bright star that unfortunately has faded away, but that does not take away their impact.
Yeah, their legacy is still just so immense and powerful. And like you said, with Faces should be like one of the last things that they re-release. I think one of the last things that they do for Mac, because this was one of Mac's favorite projects. It was his passion project that he wanted to release without any like cost. He wanted to release it just for the public to enjoy his personal work, and now it's able to be consumed by everybody on streaming, and that's another way to lay him to rest. Like, Circles was the perfect send-off album, and now you're just showing what he had to offer in his time of like great life, you know what I mean? So overall, Mac Miller, Circles, an amazing album.
Fantastic.
One of the
Swimming in
best.
Circles, both of them.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And Faces. Everything
Faces.
about it.
And every other album, mixtape, what have you in his discography.
The
Yes.
random sketch note he had a napkin in a diner. That's amazing too.
Oh, yeah.
Every
Yes.
single thing that he touched.
Yeah, anything he touched, anything he said ever. Don't
But
quote me on
Just
that.
an angel of a person too. Like that dude like looked like the most like kind and genuinely hilarious person.
Yeah, dude, that's the thing too, being a live audio geek, I really wish that I could have seen him live before he passed. Like, I have said before that Mac DeMarco, another Mac, I got to meet him and I got to hug him and talk to him, and it was like the most warm and endearing experience. And I feel like if I would have met Mac Miller in person, it would have been the same exact way. Like, he would have just had a huge heart.
It would have been like greeting an old friend.
Yeah, exactly. But
Nothing like having an old friend be there. But you've heard it here, folks, and be sure to check us out next week. We're always going to come back. We're always going to talk about great music, and check us out.
see our links down below. Bye.
See ya.